200 a.m., Presidential Palace, Ouagadougou. A storm was brewing not in the sky but in the very heart of Africa. Phones were ringing. Screens were flashing red. Western banks had just pulled the plug. Money transfers suspended. Loans canceled. An entire economy strangled overnight. Inside the war room, President Ibrahim Traoré didn't flinch. He stood by the window, hands behind his back gazing at the city that trusted him. His silence was louder than any speech. When he finally spoke, it was low and burning. Even our money isn't ours. This ends now. Ministers panicked. Rejecting the CFA franc is suicide, they warned. No one has ever done it. Traoré turned. His eyes weren't angry, they were awake. Then we'll be the first. One sentence, one rebellion, one continent holding its breath. This was not just about a currency, it was about dignity. How could a people be free if their wealth still sat in vaults in Paris? He opened a folder. Inside Operation Sankara, a blueprint for financial freedom. A coin made of real Burkinabe gold. A digital wallet owned by the people. A revolution not in the streets, but in the very structure of power. And then he said it. Let me show you. From that moment, the battle lines were redrawn. Not just Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Togo, Benin. They all listened. A new generation did too. Africa was no longer asking permission. It was reclaiming its name, its gold, its future. This wasn't just Traoré's moment. It was Africa's turning point. The insult didn't come from a soldier or a diplomat. It came from a banker in Paris. Africa is not ready to handle its own currency, he declared on live television. If they leave the CFA franc, they'll collapse in weeks. The clip went viral not just in Burkina Faso, but across the entire continent. In cafes from Bamako to Accra, in crowded matatus and dusty village squares, people watched and boiled with quiet rage. Collapse. We've lived with collapsed dreams for decades, they thought. What more can we lose? But inside the palace, the stakes were far from symbolic. Western banks had frozen billions. IMF loans were halted. Even basic fuel shipments were at risk. The West wasn't just warning Africa, it was punishing it for dreaming beyond its leash. Ibrahim Traoré was under siege. The headlines were brutal. Burkina Faso on the edge. Madman president threatens West African stability. And yet, he never blinked. That night, while most of the city slept under kerosene lamps, a different fire was burning behind the palace gates. Traoré brought in his most trusted advisors, not just economists, but elders, tech engineers, women's cooperative leaders, even a griot from Bobo Dioulasso. This isn't about policy, he told them. This is about soul, about sovereignty. The room filled with silence. Then slowly, one by one, heads began to nod. It wasn't just a rebellion, it was a reclamation. They reviewed plans for the Burkina gold, a currency backed by the country's own mineral wealth, not promises from Paris. They tested the prototype digital wallet sleek, translated in multiple African dialects and usable even in remote areas without internet. They reviewed alliances, trade routes, and food security protocols. Every detail had been considered. But one concern remained. What if the people don't accept it? Traoré smiled, not with arrogance but with deep faith. Give them truth. And give them something they can hold in their hand. That morning, he held up the coin on national television. A single baobab tree engraved in gold. The symbol of African resilience, rooted, unshaken, ours. And then, with a calm voice and fire in his eyes, he spoke directly to the continent. We will not beg to be free. We are free. From today, we write our own price in our own language with our own hands. In that instant, markets didn't crash, they shifted. The old order trembled. But in Africa, something even more powerful moved hope. Women in marketplaces began trading in gold-backed credits. Young coders updated the wallet app with pride. Elders passed around the new coin like a family heirloom. The insult from Europe had become a spark, not of chaos, but of consciousness. The room had gone cold. After the economic ambush, the bank freezes the sanctions, the public humiliation. Everyone expected President Ibrahim Traoré to erupt in anger. Some feared he might call for protests. Others braced for a fiery speech or retaliation. But Traoré said nothing. He didn't storm out. He didn't shout. Instead, he walked slowly to the tall windows of the presidential palace. Beyond the glass, Ouagadougou shimmered in the early dawn quiet. Fragile, unaware that its fate now hung in silence. With his hands folded behind his back, he whispered to no one in particular, "Even our money is not our own." The ministers shifted in their seats. No one dared speak. Then he asked a single question. "How much gold do we really have?" The answer came with hesitation: 78 tons. But most of it, like their money, was locked away in foreign vaults. Traoré turned his head slightly. "Then it's time to bring it home." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look furious. But something had shifted, like the silent tremor before a quake. He returned to the table, laid down a thick folder, and simply said, "Operation Sankara." The name sent a chill across the room. Everyone recognized it, the unfinished dream of the man who once tried to give Africa its pride back. Traoré's voice was still calm, but his words were thunder. "We'll create our own currency, backed by our gold, outside the French treasury, outside the Western banks. This time we won't ask permission." There was a long silence. Then chaos. "We can't do that," the finance minister exclaimed. "We'll be crushed, sanctioned, cut off." But Traoré didn't flinch. He opened the folder. Inside were designs, charts, trade agreements, digital wallet plans already tested in rural provinces. He had been planning this for months, in silence, in shadows, waiting for the right moment. And now it had come. "Let them freeze the money," he said. "They just gave us the reason to never need them again." It wasn't just strategy, it was something deeper. He had listened to the old mothers selling millet in the markets of Bobo Dioulasso. He had watched the young boys fixing phones under mango trees in Ouahiguya. He had remembered the stories of grandfathers who once traded with real gold, not invisible numbers on Parisian screens. "We are not poor," he said quietly. "We have always been rich. We've just been robbed. No more." That night he made the call. The nationalization of mines, the launching of the Burkina gold, the release of the app to the people. Not with fury, but with focus. In his silence, Traoré had found something rare: clarity, and the continent would never be the same again. By dawn, most of the cabinet believed the storm had passed. The shock of the Western financial freeze had faded into disbelief and debate. Many thought President Traoré would buy time, negotiate behind closed doors, or issue a vague speech to calm the public. They were wrong. At exactly 6:30 a.m., with no prior notice, every television screen, radio station, and mobile app in Burkina Faso lit up with a live broadcast. There stood President Ibrahim Traoré, in full military uniform, eyes calm, but blazing with purpose. Behind him, the national flag, but on the desk in front of him, something new shimmered under the studio lights: a gold coin. It was unlike anything the country had ever seen, embossed with the baobab tree and the map of Burkina Faso. Pure, bold, African. "People of Burkina Faso. He began last night. The West launched an economic war on our soil. They froze our funds. They blocked our access. They hoped we would kneel." He held up the coin. "Instead, we rise." In that moment, across dusty villages, urban rooftops, and crowded minibus stations, millions stopped breathing. Was this real? Today? He continued. "We abandon the colonial currency, the CFA franc. We will no longer ask Paris to approve our progress. Starting now, we use our own currency, the Burkina gold, backed 100% by our own gold from our own land." He raised his phone. The screen glowed with a new app icon, a tree in a golden circle. "This is your digital wallet. It belongs to you, not to banks, not to foreign powers. It will be distributed freely. Every citizen, every village, no fees, no permission needed." Even his closest advisors were stunned. No one had expected this today. Not even the ministers who had helped plan it. But the true twist was yet to come. The broadcast split into multiple screens. The faces of 5 other West African presidents appeared beside him: Mali, Niger, Togo, Benin, Guinea. Traoré nodded. "We move as one." Gasps echoed across kitchens, university halls, and cafes. 6 nations at once were leaving the CFA system. A coordinated economic liberation. No bullets, just unity. In Paris, alarm bells rang at the French central bank. In Washington, analysts scrambled for data. Across Africa, the reaction was visceral. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, people whispered the same words: "We didn't know this was possible." By noon, the app had been downloaded by millions. Market sellers were accepting Burkina gold. A grandmother in Fada Ngorma scanned her first QR code with trembling hands. A fisherman in Grand Bassam sold his catch for a currency made from his own continent's earth. All because one man refused to flinch. One act, one coin, and Africa would never be the same. It began with disbelief. In the hours after Traoré's broadcast, the streets of Ouagadougou were quiet, too quiet. No riots, no bank runs, just silence. As if 20 million people were holding their breath. But by mid-morning, something unexpected happened. In a small, open-air market near the mossy village of Ziniare, a tomato seller taped a handwritten sign to her stall. "We accept Burkina gold." By noon, the whole row of vendors had joined her. In Bobo Dioulasso, a group of moto taxi drivers gathered around a smartphone watching a tutorial on the Burkina digital wallet in Mouret. "It's easy," one said, beaming. "No middleman, no tricks." At a girls' school in Kaya, a teacher explained the coin's meaning to her students. "It's not just money," she told them, "it's dignity." And that afternoon, the shift crossed borders. In Mali, the youth leader of a Pan-African group posted, "If they can do it, so can we." In Ghana, a popular radio host opened his segment with one sentence: "This is how real independence looks." In Congo, university students began designing mock-ups for a Congo gold digital wallet. The West watched in shock. The French central bank called an emergency press briefing. American media ran stories titled, "West Africa Goes Rogue," but their words fell flat. Because in Africa, the mood was electric. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #gold, is ours, #African wallet, and Sankara returns trended from Nairobi to Lagos. In Cotonou, a mural appeared overnight, a painting of Traoré holding the gold coin aloft like a torch. Below it, in bold red paint, "We are not poor, we are robbed." Then came the governments. South Africa issued a formal statement applauding Burkina Faso's leadership. Ethiopia sent envoys to study the digital infrastructure. Rwanda called for a special AU summit on financial sovereignty. Even countries still using colonial currencies were forced to respond. Senegal's central bank promised a review of CFA policy. Ivory Coast's president, under growing youth pressure, called the move interesting. But the most unexpected ripple came from ordinary people. A herder in northern Niger paid for veterinary medicine using his digital wallet, no fees, no French oversight. A woman running a tailoring co-op in Lomé sent her first international payment directly in Burkina gold. A village chief in Togo refused a foreign NGO's donation. "We don't need their crumbs," he said. "We have our own bread now." It was no longer just Traoré's vision. It had become a movement, not organized by institutions but by instinct, not forced by arms but lifted by hope. For the first time in generations, Africans weren't just reacting to global events. They were leading one. And the world. The world could only watch and wonder what would happen next. 6 months later, the landscape of West Africa had changed not just politically but spiritually. Where there was once skepticism, there was now pride. In every region from the gold mines of Burkina Faso to the fishing coasts of Benin, a quiet revolution had taken root. And at the heart of it stood Ibrahim Traoré, no longer seen as just a president, but as a gardener of the future. In the newly built central bank of Burkina Faso, Traoré stood before a sealed vault. Behind the golden doors lay something more than metal. It was the reclaimed dignity of a people once told they could not lead themselves. He looked over the crowd. Elders in traditional smocks, young engineers in digital startups, farmers, teachers, mothers, children, all watching him with eyes that no longer pleaded but gleamed with ownership. "Today," he said, "our gold sleeps on Burkinabe soil. Our currency is born from our own labor, and our future will be written not in someone else's language but in our own voice." Across the country, transformation was visible. In Koudougou, students used the digital wallet to pay school fees faster, cheaper, and without middlemen. In Dori, solar panels powered by direct trade with India now lit villages at night. In Bobo Dioulasso, a new generation of coders was developing the second version of the wallet, faster blockchain secured and fully translated into Fulfulde and Dioula. This wasn't just financial innovation, it was psychological liberation. Children grew up knowing their parents didn't need French permission to use their money. Women's cooperatives traded directly across borders. Teenagers quoted Thomas Sankara not as a ghost of the past, but as a blueprint for the present. Even the continent's cultural soul responded. At FESPACO, Africa's premier film festival, a new documentary titled "We Printed Our Own Future" received a standing ovation. Musicians released tracks celebrating the gold coin. Poets performed verses calling it the seed that cracked concrete. And across the border, other nations followed. 14 countries had now joined the African gold system. The CFA franc was fading into memory, its power no longer feared. When asked how he did it, Traoré replied simply, "I didn't free a people. I reminded them they were already free." He often returned to a village outside Ouagadougou where an old farmer once said, "I feel safe with my money now." That farmer's son was now studying blockchain in Nairobi. His daughter ran a marketplace where all transactions happened in Burkina gold. And still, Traoré didn't rest. He visited tech centers. He met youth leaders. He listened, because this was never about one man. It was about 1,000 tomorrows planted in the soil of one brave today. He stood under a mango tree in a quiet village just outside Ouagadougou. Around him were no microphones, no cameras, just people. An elderly woman approached her, back curved with time, holding a coin in her palm. She opened her hand slowly. "I have never trusted banks," she whispered. "But this feels like mine." Beside her, a young girl clutched a phone. The app was open, glowing faintly in the shade. "I used it to buy notebooks for school," she smiled, "with my own account." For a moment, Traoré said nothing. Then, he looked up at the villagers, mothers, farmers, students, elders, and said quietly, "This is why we did it." That sentence would echo across the continent, because what had started as a desperate act of survival had grown into something no one, not even his enemies, could ignore. In the first week, 4 million downloads of the Burkina wallet. By month 2, 12 million users across 6 nations. Within 6 months, 14 African countries had adopted or begun developing gold-backed digital currencies. In Ghana, a university launched the first course on African monetary sovereignty. In Senegal, school textbooks were rewritten to include the story of Burkina gold. In Tanzania, local cooperatives were trading directly through the app without Western banks. What began as resistance had become resilience. What began with a coin had become a continent-wide echo. And as Traoré stood again at the podium, this time at the African Union, his voice was no longer that of a lone rebel. It carried the weight of a generation. They told us we couldn't do it. They told us we would fall. But we did not fall. We remembered who we were, and we rose. The hall erupted in applause. "Africa is not waiting for permission," he continued. "We are no longer the shadow in someone else's story. We are the authors now. We are the ink. We are the gold." Outside in the streets of Accra, Kinshasa, Kigali murals began to bloom. A boy in Lagos painted "Gold belongs to the people" on his school wall. A girl in Nairobi posted, "Our money, our voice, our turn." And now to you watching this unfold from wherever you are, what if your country was next? What if you didn't have to wait? Download the wallet. Talk to your neighbors. Ask the question they don't want us to ask. Why are we still borrowing power? When we've always had it, Africa has moved. And this time it won't move alone. Because once a people taste ownership of their gold, their voice, their future, there's no going back.